challenging thought. I want you to talk to one of your friends or everybody and answer this question. Does distress, emotional distress, motivate improvement in social emotional functioning? 30 seconds. Go. Talk to your friends. Answer the question. I'm emotionally distressed. Do I improve my motivation for social emotional functioning? If I'm distressed.
So maybe you can.
Okay? Come on, we all deal with children every day who are deeply emotionally distressed.
Shuts me down.
Anyway, I'm sure all of you have strong opinions about this and are not going to be impacted by anybody's discourse. So let's answer it. Let's answer it. How many people say yes? How many people say yes? Emotional distress motivates improvement in social emotional function. How many? Hardly any. How about you say, Bob, you're crazy. That's a crazy thought, right? So now let's ask the follow-up question. The last time you can remember being emotionally distressed, did you do something about it? Of course you did. So then why are you telling me no? Why are you telling me no? Why are you telling me no? Motivation. Not that it works, but I'm going to try something because most of the time it doesn't work, right? But you're at least trying to do something about the distress you feel. Now, that's what leads us into this idea of strength-based approaches. Because these guys are booed every time they go anywhere. Because they say, forget about making people feel better. They make them feel better, they're not going to do anything differently. They're going to feel great about their totally screwed up lives, and they're not going to do anything different at all. Let me just continue to give them this medication, and their moms this medication, and their sisters this medication, and everybody's going to feel better no matter how screwed up their life really is. All right? So that's this idea. Why do we keep trying to make people feel better? Why are we trying to get rid of anxiety? Why are we trying to get rid of depression? Why are we trying to get rid of uncomfortable feelings? Because most of the time when we have uncomfortable feelings, we actually do something that works to get rid of them. That's this strength-based idea. They say, forget about symptom relief. We're going to go straight to what we call competency building. And here's what happens. When you're foolish enough to say, yes, I would like to work at the high school for the emotionally disturbed and conduct disordered and criminals in Baltimore City Public Schools, because that sounds like an awesome place to have a lot of fun. And your wife says, are you out of your mind? You could get killed there. And you know what? The truth of it is, we had to search the building every morning before the kids got there for dead bodies. We only found 3 in the 5 years I was there, but 3 was enough for my wife to say, you're not going back there. I don't care how much fun you're having. So, here's what I learned there. Every kid that was on my caseload, if I ever talked to them about their loss, their grief, their bad feelings, what happened? They never saw me again. They hated me. They saw me in the hallway. They ran away. They didn't want anything to do with me. They didn't want anything to do with me because the truth of it is, they couldn't handle their feelings of loss, grief, and suffering. Couldn't do it. And every time we talked about it, which is our normal course of events, let's talk about why you're having these feelings, why you're here in this building, why you're endangering yourself all the time. Boom, never seen them again. Never. So I had to kind of really switch up. And then I started talking about how do we keep you out of jail? I see you just got back after doing 3 more months. Kind of screwed up your credits there a little bit. How do I keep you from grandma throwing you out of the house again? How do I do these things? Then, help me, show me, tell me. How do I run that electric cord from my neighbor's house through the ground and into my house so I have electricity even though it's cut off and my neighbor doesn't get mad about it? You know, normal, practical problem solving. Then what do I have? Bob, I need help. Where's Bob? You know, all of this kind of stuff. I had kids who were suspended for 3, 4, 10 days. They would sneak in the back of the building and come up to my office because they had something going on. Totally changed the relationship between what I did and who I was to them than before. So here's the problem. If you're doing symptom relief, you have to convince them that there's something wrong with that. And that is a struggle because I got to get you ready. I got to get you ready. I got to get you ready. Getting ready is the important thing. And here's what getting ready looks like. So I like George. He's right down the street from me. He lets me go out on his little, wharf and catch crabs once in a while, even though it's a restricted area. So George is a friend of mine. But this book is an amazing way to connect with parents who are trying to do things for their kid under adverse circumstances. You guys have a parent training component. You have parents who come in for stuff. You have parent engagement stuff. You have that?
Yeah.
I guarantee if you take a look at George's book and you take some of his ideas, then you realize, well, maybe that should be my parent training. Maybe my parent training should be based on teaching children how to make difficult decisions. Maybe it should be based on investing in yourself. Maybe you should be teaching them how to regain faith in individuals that they've lost already somehow. And then George went nuts, right? He went nuts because he pulled the trigger on the big one. And he said, why have we forgotten about integrity? Why have we stopped talking about integrity? Where is integrity in our life? And as parents or adults, are we actually talking to them specifically about what integrity looks like and how do you live with some level of integrity? So he went off the reservation on his stuff because God forbid we talk about that. And then, like I said, the state of Washington, we already talked about that earlier. Mona and Ron have put out this huge, awesome, free approach to not only methods for teaching, but also here's what the content looks like as well. And like I said, free download, great stuff, I love it. So, we can talk about, I'd probably talk for another 15 minutes, and then you guys can pretend like you don't have any questions and go home 15 minutes early, because I know you all love that. Okay? So we'll just pretend like, maybe we'll have one person ask one really important question. They're like, oh, I don't know the answer, so now I'm embarrassed and humiliated, so goodbye, I'm done with you. Right? We can do that. So let's talk about something really important. Some really important ideas. So, besides just handling crazy stuff, sometimes you get attached to very nefarious characters and they give you this idea that they can probably function and stay alive some kind of way. And then you get this guy that comes in 3 years, you think you're never going to see him again every time you see him. And for 3 years, he functions in a stable, maladaptive way, and he lives, and you see him, and you're pretty happy with yourself. Like, wow, look at that. I never thought that would ever happen. And then you go to school, and there's obituary sitting on the door, right? And that's what happens, because they rob this of you. They give this idea, oh, I can be better, life can work for me, I got this, I'm doing way better, and then boom, something really bad happens, right? Doesn't happen all the time, but it happens enough. So, here's the, wait a minute, this is not about James, it's about somebody totally different. Why am I talking about Jim? Is it the next slide? Did I skip one? Did I read my own slides? Look at that. Okay. Well, anyway, let me tell you about James, even though it's not a slide here. So that's an extra 2 minutes we're going to have to add on. So maybe we'll skip the question. So here's what happened. Again, probably some offense will be taken at this comment, but that's okay. I get people sometimes think I'm offensive, and that's all right. I feel comfortable with that. So my wife, as all good wives are, say, I want to go see this movie. I'm like, honey, that's fine. Take your girlfriends to go see that movie. I'm not going to see that movie. That sounds so horrible. And now you got to go. I'm like, I'm going. And I'm watching this movie. I'm trying to stay awake. I get the popcorn and stuff like that. And right? And then something crazy happens. The woman in the movie says to the guy, the reason you're going out there and seeking revenge is because you can't really face the loss and grief you've had as an early person. So your revenge really isn't out straight about deserved revenge. It's about you can't face the loss and grief that happened to you as a child. And I'm like, boom, there's James, right? That explained the whole thing, because all his stable maladaptive functioning was totally avoiding, both of his parents died of AIDS when he was little. He was living here and there and everywhere, and things were always happening to him. And, his juvenile probation officer always had a gun when she came to the building. It's like he's that kind of guy, right? But then when you look at it, you say, wow, I never even went there. I never went like, okay, we have a good relationship. We've been around for a couple of years. Let's talk about this stuff. But not talking about that stuff allowed it to stay there and allowed him to look at things from a revenge motivation and not a loss and grief motivation. So it kind of like really opened my eyes to, okay, I don't want to do this. It's going to cause a problem. Man, I got to go there. Let's talk about that a little bit. And you guys who are dealing with adolescents know that a lot of the guys who are very revenge motivated, who anybody does anything to them, you try to talk to them about any of the loss and grief in their life, they're going to be extremely avoidant of that. So I'm just going to say, even though you don't want to go there, maybe you won't have to have this happen to you later and read the newspaper and have a problem. So, I know I don't have a slide about it. I should read my slides before I go into it. So let's do the next thing. So there's this idea in the psychological literature that attachment's really important. You guys think attachment's really important? Yeah. There's a reactive attachment disorder. There's like, if you don't have attachment, the rest of your life is screwed up, blah, blah, blah. There's all this stuff, right? So I'm looking at that and I'm thinking, attachment's really important, but I think they're missing the point about attachment. I think the point about attachment is not attachment, but they didn't learn how to transfer their attachment. Is transfer of attachment a normal developmental process? Well, people don't like to accept that transfer of attachment is, but it is, right? You're down with your mom, then you got your brothers and sisters, and then you got your wife, and then you get your kids, then you get your dog, and then you're dead. That's how it works, right? You transfer your attachment across these people or these things as your life goes forward, right? So, I go to this, you guys ever go to court with your guys, ever get these phone calls from jail? Hey, I'm going to court today, could you please show up and lie to the judge about who I really am? So, I used to get these calls a lot, right? So I get this call, this guy's sitting there, and he's in jail, and he's sitting up there, and, I'm there, and his teacher's there, and the judge says, oh, wow, you got all these supportive people, there's your parents, so I'm just going to send you home on your own recognizance, get you started back in school, boom, you're done with jail. And his parents got up and said, thanks, Judge, but no thanks. We thought you were going to keep him, and we're just here to cry about it. We're not here to take him back. So they walked out of the courtroom, just like that. Boom, thanks, but no thanks, I'm gone. And I'm like, I wonder how often this is happening. I wonder how often people are saying, yeah, thanks a lot. No thanks, just keep, right? Because I've been hearing a lot about it. I've been hearing a lot about people saying, you know what, forget it, I'm done. So these were adoptive parents, things didn't work out. Kids up 12, 13, and the judge looks at him like it's his fault, right? Like it's, okay, what did you do that you can't go home, right? He looks right at him and says, what are you going to do now? And he looks right at the teacher next to me, he says, I want a home like that. I'm like, wow, he's only been in this lady's classroom a couple of months. But what she did in just a couple of months is teach him that attachment exists, that it's real, that people can have that it's free, that there's certain people that are good at giving it without expecting it in return. So this is what he says, and I'm like, wow, I'm learning a lot about attachment disorder that I didn't really know before about how it works. But this idea of what we're doing when we're trying to do things for children like this always falls into what we call in the prison system 3 squares and clean sheets. I'm going to give them free breakfast, I'm going to give them lunch, I'm going to give them housing, but none of it's about the relational environment. None of it is, where's the welfare for relationships? Where's that at? Because this is what this guy's talking about. He doesn't care about eating 3 square meals a day. He doesn't care about clean sheets on his bed. What he cares about is, does he have anybody in his life that looks like her? Normalcy is the relational environment, not the 3 squares and clean sheets approach. So I'm just throwing these things out there to have you kind of get an idea of breaking out of what we see in the newspaper and every day about like, hey, here's their life. Because they have this life, because they have these things, this is their destiny. Well, it's not their destiny if you're down and you're looking and you're hanging out and you're seeing some different kinds of things and forcing you into this stuff. So, if you can show them what caring and compassion looks like, and you can show them that it exists, they're going to do things to go get it. And then once they start doing things to go get it, your ability to control their behavior turns way better than ever before, because they want that relationship. That's what they're looking for. Yes?
So I feel like we've had students that sort of fit this profile, and certainly then, the staff that work with him understand background and all of that kind of thing, and the compassion has always been there. And then I think, and anybody chime in here, that when it almost gets too close, they sort of turn it back around, sort of like, I'm going to refuse you before you refuse me.
Yeah.
So we have that situation that goes on, then how do you break that cycle?
Well, the thing is, you have to look at it, see it, and realize that's really the next step towards growth, right? The really next step is, I'm doubting you, prove it. I'm doubting you, prove it. I'm doubting you, prove it. So many times, they've doubted it, and somebody's unproven it, right? So you gotta just get to the point where like, hey, I'm gonna have to prove this more than once. I'm gonna have to prove it more than twice, because it's been unproven probably 1,000 times. So how do I, because he's testing, that's all it is. Is this real? Is this real? Is this real? Is this real? And you're gonna get hit with that. That's gonna happen. And that's just the deal. It's like, hey, all you have to do is say, this is real. I care about you, that's real. Period. All right, do your math now. So that's kind of the idea. So let me just tell you one other story about this attachment stuff. So I see a lot of kids, lots and lots of kids who have lots and lots of problems. So I had this one girl who had all of this neglect and abuse, and she's been through 4 or 5 foster homes. And I go to her IEP meeting, and she's got to go to a more restrictive environment. She can't keep her hand halfway out of her throat. She's got all of these problems all the time. We go to the IEP meeting, her social worker doesn't show up, her foster care doesn't show up, nobody shows up, and we just have to do what we have to do, right? Next meeting, same profile, right? Same girl, neglect, abuse, 4 or 5 foster homes. I got 5 mothers at the house. I got 5 mothers at the IEP meeting, all looking at each other with some serious hate, right? Because she's called every one of them up and said, can you come to my IEP meeting? So I got her biological mother, I got her biological mother's lawyer, I got her foster worker, I got the foster care parent, I got the foster care lawyer, and I got 3 other people, and she's calling them all mom. Not to say that that's a healthy response, right? Because that's kind of like over the top. But look at how much this person is seeking that attachment, that she's making her own phone calls, and she's created this attachment situation where all of these people are coming. So the idea is, I got 2 kids, same deal, right? Same history. I got one of them, boom, you're going down the road to the institution. I got another one with how am I going to handle the hostility between all these people, because all of them think they're the real mom, and this kid's calling every one of them mom. So the idea is, you have to kind of break out of this history of what attachment looks like and say to yourself, why is this kid unable to think of anybody in a parental role? And why is this kid able to think of everybody in a parental role? And what impact does that potentially have on one versus the other? So to me, I think there needs to be a whole reformulation of the impact of attachment on functioning, and change the idea of attachment to this idea of transfer of attachment. So, here's what we're talking about with a lot of kids who have abuse. I'm going to talk to you about the hardcore part of abuse, because you see these first 4 bullets, we're all pretty familiar with that. But this idea that the first thing we have to do, anybody who has abuse, is deal with the self-worth problem. because the self-worth problem that comes out of abuse is really the killer. That's the one that impacts you forever. So, I know I've kind of told you some stories. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but here's another one that's going to be a little bit hard to take. So I'm working in this high school. The guidance counselor brings me this girl, and obviously I need to call the ambulance. She's going to have to leave here and go to the emergency room for mental health because she's a danger to herself. She's florid. She's out of control. She's obviously sexually acting out. Lots of drugs, lots of stuff, right? And the guidance counselor brings, but I still have to do this little interview while the ambulance is coming because she's going somewhere else because she's obviously a danger to herself and others. So the kid comes in, and I'm like, have you ever dealt with those kids that tell you everything right away, have no defense mechanism at all? And I was like, why are you telling me all this stuff? Because that's a real indicator that you got serious problems because you don't know me from Jack, and boom, you're telling me everything, right? So she comes in, and what happened was she's a fairly normal functioning individual, and her mom had her boyfriend move in. When her boyfriend moved in, they had problems, so the mom sent her to go live with her dad out of state. And after a very brief period of time, her dad starts sexually abusing her. Takes her a little while, she gets back home, now she's back at school, and we deal with this all the time. You know, it's a disappointment to acknowledge it, but this is not an unusual situation, frankly. Maybe it's unusual for the dad to be doing it, but somebody's doing it, right? But that wasn't the problem. You know, that wasn't what was going to put her in the hospital. What her mom said to her when she returned is what really put her in the hospital because it impacted her self-worth. And we've all heard these things. What did you do to deserve this? You know, don't talk to my boyfriend. You know, all these kinds of horrible things that people get told as, you know, the victims of abuse. But what's the really bad one? What's the really bad one that we all need to be ready for? I thought this would probably happen. Right? I thought this would probably happen. Your dad did that before. Right? So where does that go in somebody's brain? Well, that flips them into the hospital, right? Not necessarily because of what happened. It doesn't have anything to do with what happened, right? It has to do with the meaning and the feeling and the worth and the relationship. But oftentimes, we handle all of these ones right here, right? We give all of these ones, we try real hard with those ones, right? But do we directly have a way of attacking the poor self-worth that comes along with abuse? And my point is like, that's the thing that's the lifelong thing, is the meaning and the feelings and the self-worth that comes along with it. So you have to be ready to say things that are going to mitigate those kinds of things that happen. So instead of being self-worth killers, they're actually just events. Here's an event. You took the wrong meaning from it. You're really worth something. You're valuable. You can do this. You can do that. You've done something else. But the problem is we don't put self-worth on our IEPs, on our 504 plans, on our counseling lists, on our safety plans, and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm saying to you, if you come across somebody who has an abuse history, you should have, here's what I'm going to do about self-worth, because self-worth is really the thing that lasts a long time when it comes to this stuff. Now here's another one, okay? We have all this parent misbehavior, alcoholism, drug abuse, criminal stuff. You really have to say, with these guys, how am I going to help you solve problems? Because you have a lot of problems you got to solve. You got to eat breakfast, you got to have electricity, you know, you got to be able to get on the bus, you got to be able to do all these kinds of things. So I have a very practical problem solving. Okay, what problem are we solving today that you have? But the other thing that's come along that's been very, very interesting is this idea that these children carry around what we call invisible stigmas. That they have stigmas inside of them because this has happened. But because of all the shame and secrecy that goes along with these things, that oftentimes we don't see that. And the problem is shame and secrecy about one event turns into shame and secrecy as a personality pattern. So if we see these kinds of things, the problem really isn't always just about these events, but how do you make sure these events don't turn into a personality pattern for a lifetime that I need to be shameful and secret, and I can't really access my help, or tell my neighbors, or get my help from somebody else because this, whatever happened to me, is so shameful that it has to be a secret. So this idea that when we deal with abuse or neglect or other things, are we really attacking the real problem? Because, we do a lot of stuff for them. But are we really attacking self-worth? And are we really looking at shame and secrecy as really the main issue here? So I'm going to go over one more thing. We're almost done. I'm going to talk about what we've been trying to do. Robert and I have been trying to do something about this for a long time. We've been very motivated. And as I mentioned, there's a lot of other people trying to do something about this for a long time as well. But there's certain barriers to it that makes it hard. What's wrong with him? So that question that I get all the time, what's wrong with this guy? What's wrong with this guy? What's wrong with this guy? Every day I'm trying to turn that into, okay, let's just take a look and see what happened to this guy. And maybe that's really the contributing factor. And how do we mitigate that? Rather than, okay, let me figure out what disability code you have, what level of service you need, and all of that. So I look at his record, I'm like, wow, this guy's got straight A's. Wow, this guy hasn't been referred for any behavioral or discipline problems in a couple of years. That's pretty interesting, don't you think, guys? Yeah, Bob, we're doing a great job. Sign him up next year for the same level of service. We don't need a reevaluation. He's good. Everything's working. I'm like, whoa, back up. Look, I see this previous evaluation. When his previous evaluation was done, one of his parents had died. He'd moved into foster care, and now he's living with his aunt, and things are stabilized. And when are we going to say this isn't about a disability? When are we going to say this is about he's ready to try something else? Why would we think that? Like, okay, but I'm just saying, this is the kind of thinking I'm getting, right? Even though the kid's been fine, and even though the original evaluation quoted all of these different things, because somebody labeled him as disabled or disordered, now that's a lifetime? It's not a lifetime. It should be thought about all the time. Where are we ready to take the next step with him? So it was difficult, it was challenging, but we made the first steps towards where's the general education option? Where's the step one? You can't go to step 5, you gotta go to step 1. Where's the first class he can do that's outside of this restrictive setting? And let's move after that one to the next one, because you're not gonna jump big. You're going to have to jump small because nobody's going to cooperate with. Well, maybe you guys are awesome and you have awesome people you work with that cooperate with this all the time. I don't. That's a blessing for you. So, the other thing is where are we with going beyond just trying to find out what's wrong with them and assessing the positive things, the places, the classrooms, the environment in which the person is doing the right thing and things are working for them. Are we looking at anger as much as we should? Do we have separate assessments just to assess the amount of anger somebody has? Because these guys get really, really angry. And so where is our anger management IEP, goal, or whatever? Because a lot of the time it's not the emotional outrageousness. It's, I am really angry about the things that have happened. So where are we with specifically assessing and trying to deal with anger when we see these kinds of things? All right, so zombie interventions. It's my last idea. It's not my idea. It's the Council for Exceptional Children. They wrote this article a few years ago. I love it. Because their whole point was, maybe the problem is that we're doing the wrong thing that's not working. Because a lot of people who work in the system, who do different things, their grandma told them something 25 years ago that they still believe, and no matter how many times it's never worked, they still trying it. So to some degree, you have to say to people, what are you doing that's not working right now? Let's start with that, and let's have you stop doing that before we try to do anything positive. So where are we with, what are you doing right now that's absolutely not working, and can we just agree to stop doing that? Because people don't want to stop doing things that don't work. They still love the things that don't work, and they still want to keep trying them. And no matter how many interventions you do that really do work, as soon as your stuff works, they're going to go right back to the zombie intervention that never worked before, and they're going to try that again because grandma told them 25 years ago that if you just do this, everything in the world will be fine. So you got to kill the zombie intervention. So last thing is I try to keep track of improvement as the core of the assessment. If the child's making progress, that should be what we base decisions on, not diagnosis, not disability, not how many other things have happened, but are we doing something and is it working some kind of way? And add that kind of RTI thing into what we're doing on a regular basis. Well, look at that. 5 minutes early. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, too bad. Oh, I knew. All right, I knew I could count on one person. Yeah.
Hands down.
There you go.
All right. I wanted to go back to the stable maladaptive functioning that you mentioned earlier.
Right.
The first thing that came to mind was a neighbor of mine that I used to have, and it's not there anymore.
Right.
It was a functioning alcoholic. Is that akin to it? It's 3 hots in a cot. Everything's going okay as far as I'm
Exactly.
concerned.
Exactly.
But
And
then for him to extricate himself from that, it involves distress. Just like some of these kids that we have here, they're going along to get along. It's a two-pronged question, actually. So what do how do you move them out of that? And how do you move them towards the distress part? Because that's the gate of hell that he has to go through to extricate himself from the stable maladaptive functioning.
First thing is, what are you helping them with? You forget about the mental health stuff. Am I helping you stay in your grandma's health? Am I stopping you from getting arrested again? What am I doing right now to make it so you can do tomorrow? And then I build on that to say, okay, here's what you're doing right now to make it till tomorrow. That's not going to get you to next week. That's not going to get you through high school. That's not going to get you. Here's what you might want to think about is going to work to get you to more than just tomorrow, or more than just being able to sleep on somebody's couch somewhere. You know, so the thing is it's all about your relationship building, all about your attachment, all about your, I'm going to prove it to you again that my ability to care for you is going to make the difference in you investing in yourself, because once I teach you this, you're going to know that your investment in what you're doing is going to pay off for you, because that's the big claim, right? Everybody's living in Kafka's world. We're not living these other worlds. So I will tell you, the other thing I use, which is kind of hilarious, because it was ridiculous, it was kind of like that tantrum, is that they call me for all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So they were having this spelling bee the other day. Spelling bee was going on, and like, oh, Bob, you got to come down here for this spelling bee. What am I doing coming down for the spelling bee? That's crazy, right? So the kid who was supposed to be the smartest, #1 guy, lost on the first word. His parents were out there. So where do you think he was after he lost on the first word? He was in the boys' bathroom, wedged against the dirtiest toilet I've ever seen, and his parents were out in the lobby. They're like, Bob, I'm not calling his mom to get him out of this toilet. I'm not doing that. That's going to cause an issue. You're the psychologist. Figure it out. I'm like, okay, all right. So I walk in, I see him, he's sitting in the bathroom. Never seen this kid before a day of my life. But what do I see? The very first thing he's got. I see right away, he's got the Batman t-shirt. What does a Batman t-shirt tell me? What does it tell me? Bruce, why do we fall? Right? Just out of the movie. All I had to do was say to him, why do we fall? Guy's up in the lobby with his parents. So sometimes you have to look and see what iconic figure these people are associated with and use that. Because it's kind of crazy, right? I mean, I could have walked in there, said anything in the world that would have never, ever worked. But it's like, Bruce, why do we fall? Boom, the guy's up, he's out the door, right? Because I'm using that kind of, I saw it, he's wearing a Batman t-shirt. Oh, this is easy. I know how to fix this, right? So it's kind of like that, right?
The second part is that, we're with our kids, like many of my students, I'm with 43 minutes a day. So it's slow burn. You're doing it every day, but little bits. How do you make it substantial? I guess it's a slow burn.
Well, I'll tell you. If you look at some of these strength-based things that I talked about, you're going to connect with one or two. You're going to see some stuff there that's going to give you some great ideas. You're going to look at Bruce Carey's stuff. I guarantee if you would read George's book, you're going to come up with some really good ideas. So it's like, here's where the stuff is. I can't cover it all today for you, but I can at least tell you, here's what strength-based approaches look like. Here's what they're all talking about. Go there, you're going to find some, you're going to find more than I can give you here. All right? All right. Okay. Hey, thanks everybody. You've been a great audience.
Yeah, I think so.